If you're a mid-level to C-suite leader who wants to own your growth and figure out your next small, brave move to achieve your leadership goals, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Small Brave Moves podcast, a weekly deep dive on how to be braver in leadership and in life for exceptional results. I'm your host, Nicole Bianchi, best-selling author, certified master executive coach, NSA certified speaking professional, chief bravery officer, and tough talk expert. If you're ready to become a better, braver, and more authentic leader, let's dive in. Welcome back to the Small Brave Moves podcast. This week, I'm so excited to be joined by a guest who has led at the highest levels of healthcare leadership, built a nationally recognized culture, and earned best places to work, and made the brave move to step away from the CEO role she spent 24 years earning. And she'll be the first to tell you that none of that prepared her for the hardest thing she's ever had to do, leading herself. Patricia Kearns is a former president and CEO of QLI, one of the country's leading rehabilitation organizations for brain and spinal cord injury. Today, she's the chief operating officer at Immanuel Communities, a completely different role, a brand new team, and zero home field advantage. And in this conversation, she gets brutally honest about what it actually takes to let go of control and why patience with yourself is one of the most underrated leadership skills, and what happens when the biggest thing standing between your team and their growth is you. Join me in welcoming Pat Kearns to the podcast. I'm so excited for Pat to be here today to unlock and just kind of unpack some Conquer Yourself moments in our Conquer Yourself series. So Pat, thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love the topic, and it's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. So glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. So Pat, let's jump into it. So you have led at the highest level, CEO of a very successful business, amazing culture, best places to work. And you're now stepping into a completely different role. And most people think about leadership as mastering others. But this conversation is about something so much harder, and that's really mastering yourself, which is a part of our Conquer Yourself series. So let's start here. Where is your leadership feeling particularly hard for you right now?
Given the change and transitions I've been through over the last few years, and this is probably always true of my leadership journey, but one of the things I'm really trying to master right now is patience with myself. I jumped out of a CEO role, retired for all given purposes, took a year off, spent a little time consulting. I got bored fast and jumped back into the workforce. I'm currently serving as the VP of Construction and Capital Planning for Immanuel, which has been a great team and a great organization for me to be a part of. But when you're coming in new to an organization, still in healthcare, but a very different organization, serving a different population, a new team, new processes, it requires me to have patience with myself to be sure I'm not just launching in, trying to fake it till I make it, but really being patient to take time to learn, to get to know the people I'm working alongside, to get to know the organization and the priorities, all of the processes, lots of new things. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to conquer with myself is just patience and grace to take the time I need to learn.
Is there anything leaving that CEO role, retiring, kind of dabbling in a few things, and now launching into another career? Is there anything you had to let go of?
Yeah. When you're used to having the ultimate accountability for an organization, you're used to being in control all the time. Even if that control comes from a good place, a place of serving others, being in control really takes some time to let go of, not having to make all the decisions, not having to be in charge of everything, and ultimately be the final stop for everything. And so stepping away for a year just to decompress from that, to have some time to really dive into getting to know myself at this age and at this stage in my career and what my priorities were, what I really enjoy doing, what drives me to get out of bed every morning. It was good to have that time away to learn that, but habits are habits. And so jumping back into a role even if it's a different role in a different organization, there are still those tendencies to want to jump right back into being in control of everything. It's been good, but a little bit of work to let go of that for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, the conquer yourself journey never ends, right? There's just points where it kind of ebbs and flows, and there's points where we're doing probably pretty well, and then things pop back up. So tell me about a time that you were trying to control an outcome, maybe a person, and somehow it backfired, whether it's in your current role or in your past role.
I have a mindset that was instilled in me early on, which is a really healthy mindset. As a leader, you should never ask your team to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. And I'm a blue collar girl from Western Nebraska. I don't mind rolling up my sleeves and being in the midst of the work. I think what can happen though with that mindset is you can start to cross a line and wanting to, again, from a good place, wanting to shield people from the burden of hard decisions or hard work. I'm a bit of a perfectionist too, wanting to make sure the outcomes go perfectly for the people you're serving, especially when you're serving a vulnerable population. And so I've been in that position that I'm helping up and coming leaders develop their skills. But the barrier that gets in the way for me is I want to control the outcomes. I want to control the process so that I'm really taking on that responsibility. And what I have found in those moments, whether I was overseeing our clinical program at QLI or serving as the CEO, trying to be really cautious not to do that in my current role. But what I find is when you're constantly trying to control process and outcomes, you prevent people from growing. And then if you're in a position of needing to promote people or to take on new challenges for the sake of the organization's growth, your people aren't ready to do that.
Mhm.
And if people aren't growing and learning, you're probably also interfering with their satisfaction in their job and the pride that they might be craving for their work. And so as much as I like things to go perfectly and I never want to burden anybody, that ultimately that level of control can really interfere with people's success and their happiness.
I really appreciate you hitting on the cost, right? That's the true cost of the control. And sometimes we don't see it. And it's so fascinating earlier on in our career as leaders that when we move from that, like, I have to take care of everything because I'm the individual contributor, I'm the expert, right? And then we move to
Mhm.
the leader role, that it's hard to really let that go in a lot of cases
Mhm.
because we want to solve, direct, take care of things, which is a form of control as well. If leaders don't make that shift, they become, right, well, I have to go to my leader for everything. And then things slow down. We know where that ends up going, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
how do you catch yourself before you go back into control mode? Like, what is something that you notice that when you notice you're heading that direction again?
Right now, I will say I have the benefit of sort of structural modification, if you will, as a way to help me from being in control. As I grew up at QLI on the clinical side of things, and ultimately just given the size of the company, even in my CEO role, I had been at that organization for 24 years, was a clinician by background. I built many of the processes, not just on the clinical side, but on the HR side, building structures on our campus. So I was, for all given purposes, the expert at most things in my role. And so it made it easy for me to be sort of quick to take control over things, quick to make decisions on things and to move things ahead. And rather than pause and give other people a chance to come along and drive things. So in my new role as VP of construction, I have an incredible team of experts who have a level of technical expertise that I don't have. And so I'm bringing in my experience on the people leadership side, the process leadership side, and healthcare. But I have a group of contractors that really have experts when it comes to the work that we're doing to building structures and managing capital for Immanuel. So it's been a fun change for me. I don't always have the first answer. I don't always have the right answer. And that structural modification does force me to just take a pause and make sure that I'm considering the best process forward rather than just controlling things. I'm also at an age and have the experience as a leader that I've had a chance to see the downside of controlling everything.
Yeah.
I really find a lot of joy in helping individuals grow and be on that path of leadership. And so knowing that I have to take a beat before I jump in and give an answer, or I just charge forward and lead a situation so that other people can grow and learn. I've had a chance to experience both sides and definitely be on the positive side of that. I eventually, and this is true when I was in my CEO role, that I eventually learned that in order to move on to your next great thing in your career, you have to have a constant mindset of working yourself out of a
Yeah.
job. And if you're going to work yourself out of a job, then you have to bring people with you so they can get promoted into their next big roles.
That's such a great example you said just a few moments ago about take a beat, pause before I respond. And the thing I really challenge leaders with that struggle that with that, like especially this emerging leader group I was working with last week, is take a beat and ask a question. Like think about what am I most curious about right now? And ask a question and then ask another question and showing them that with just three questions, the people have resourcefulness is inside of them, right? And if you ask them three questions, they'll arrive at the solution. Now, you can always go in at the end of that third if they're way off base or something's happening and sprinkle in a little of advice or consulting, but allowing to just pause and ask questions helps make that shift too. So I love that.
Sometimes it's worth evaluating too. If I allow somebody else to move through this process from start to finish, even if it's not the same way I would do it, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And if it's not catastrophic, it's sometimes those consequences, if it doesn't go perfectly, are really great learning experiences. Now, sometimes they may be big consequences and there's a lot at stake and you do want to be part of that process. But if it's a learning opportunity, that's how I learned, right? I made lots of mistakes along the way, and I'm really grateful to have had leaders that allowed me the leeway to make some of those mistakes as long as didn't do any significant damage, because it's how I learned and how I grew into the leader that I am today.
Oh, I love that. So let's shift a little bit into brave conversations. Think about a conversation that you maybe avoided for too long. And what happened when you finally had the brave conversation?
Yeah. Early in my leadership career, I will admit that the transition from being a peer to supervising my peers was a harder transition than I expected. And when you're used to being friends with someone and working side by side and maybe not having to take accountability directly for their growth, when you shift into being their supervisor and you're accountable for giving feedback when performance is maybe not where it needs to, that was a big transition for me. And so I had some situations early in my leadership career that I did avoid having those hard conversations. And what happened over time is I let standards slip. I allowed performance to not really meet expectations. And not only did it do damage to the relationship that I had with that individual, but the people around that individual suffered as well because of that. And so at the point I finally had those courageous conversations, there's good and there's hard things that happen from that. Letting a conversation go too far and then eventually having it, there was still some irreparable damage with that relationship that I couldn't overcome. I will say though, for the good of the rest of the team and the organization, it allowed things to get back on track to have that conversation. I've gotten better at that as I've gotten older. And again, I have more experience. I probably to a fault don't always have the need to be loved and adored. And I really like conflict. So I don't mind having those conversations. But I've definitely learned whoever the conversations, the tough conversations are with, that I keep this in mind all the time. Would I rather have a little bit of conflict now, early on in the process, or would I rather allow that situation to fester and for that to be really big conflict down the road? And obviously, I'd always choose the former. I'd rather a little bit of conflict now and to deal with it as we go, to have those tough conversations early rather than to let it go and have that damage be too much to overcome. And I will say, I'm a huge fan, you know this, Nicole, of your 5 Tough Talks book. I'm a huge fan of all your work, but I have that book and that workbook by my side all the time. And I use those conversations and the tools that you have in that book consistently. And I do find if you start with those how we work conversations and utilize the ask conversations, but if you start with those early conversations, most of the time you avoid having to get to the later conversations about moving on if you really do that well up front.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I completely agree. The how we work is so foundational. It's never too late to go back and have that, even if we missed it, right? We missed it, or even if things feel a little off. I always am like, go back there. Because when people say, where do I start? What do I do? Go back to the how we work conversation, start laying the foundation, and it will make the rest of it, the other conversations, so much easier. So, for anybody that's listening that is avoiding a conversation right now, what's one piece of advice you'd give them?
certainly it's important to have the courage to have the conversation, but the most helpful tool, and again, this is part of your 5 Tough Talks book, the most helpful tool I've learned over time is take time to prepare for the conversation. You need to have the courage to take that first step. But if you really put the work in ahead of time for the conversation, what do you want the outcome of the conversation to be? Or how do you want that person to think and feel at the end of the conversation? What questions do you use to start to open up that conversation and to guide you along the way? But if you're really thoughtful about your preparation, maybe you even role play it with somebody. If you have a trusted person that you can role play that conversation with to get comfortable and get the jitters out, it's worth it. But it's worth having the courage. Again, better to have a little bit of conflict now than a lot of conflict down the road, and put the work in to prepare. And I promise it will go more smoothly.
And what I've realized, Pat, is it all boils down to avoidance. So first we're avoiding the conversation, right? We avoid it and we put it off for a period of time. And then what happens when it comes time to like, no, we finally have to have it, we're avoid having to think about it and to process it. And so then avoidance comes in a different way. And then what happens is we don't prepare and then the conversation doesn't go. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. In fact, I was speaking on a stage a few weeks ago and I was talking about the cost of avoidance, avoiding the conversations, avoid challenging situations, avoiding making a decision, and we avoid actually preparing for it or thinking about it because it's uncomfortable and we know there's some tension there. Then we just don't show up. And what's so interesting is watching somebody shift from even just a little bit of preparation, thinking through how I want to open, frame it, always close with accountability and action. Their confidence just rises so much more in the moment when they're having that conversation, not knowing how the person's going to respond and come back in that conversation with them.
Again, thinking about the early mistakes I made in avoiding conversations because it was a peer or maybe just a tough situation in general. As leaders, we are inevitably going to have tough conversations, right? There's going to be conflict, and you know that. And I'll say, jumping into my new role now, because I know there's going to be hard conversations somewhere along the way. If you set yourself up for success to open that door to have the conversations, schedule regular one-on-ones every week, every other week with the team members that you're working with regularly. Start that relationship, which I did with the How We Work conversation. So you really have some things written down that make it easy to go back to, hey, remember when we had this conversation about how we work and you asked me for this, or I asked you for this. It gives you something to reference, but you have those meetings built in. You have those easy conversations, those non-conflictual conversations up front to make it easy when it's time to have a tough conversation, to lean back on them.
Hey, senior women leader, if you're the one everyone depends on, the one leading the team, carrying the pressure, managing the expectations, solving the problems, and quietly holding it all together while feeling completely exhausted underneath it all, I want you to know I get that. I've been there too. And more importantly, you don't have to keep leading this way. And that's why I created the Brave Lead Her Ship Retreat experience. My retreats are intimate, luxurious, and deeply transformational, designed for the high-performing women leader who are ready to reclaim their energy, elevate their leadership, and stop overfunctioning their way through life and work. It's not a conference, it's not surface level networking or another room where you have to perform, prove, or hold everything together. It's a deeply curated circle where you get to breathe, be held, think clearly again, reconnect with yourself, and grow alongside some extraordinary women leaders who truly understand the weight that you carry. Every detail is intentionally designed to support that, from the luxurious accommodations to the all-inclusive experience to the executive level coaching, brave conversations, integration time, and restorative wellness experiences woven throughout the retreat. You'll walk away with greater clarity, stronger boundaries, renewed energy, and a completely different way of leading that your team and your family will feel immediately. If that sounds exactly what you need right now, I'd love to personally invite you to explore one of my upcoming retreats at the link in the show notes. Maybe I'll see you soon in the rolling hills of Tuscany, or on the quartz sand beaches of Siesta Key, or maybe even in the energy vortex of Sedona. I'd be honored to hold space for you at the next Brave Leadership Retreat. Now, Pat, I have known you for a period of time. I'm going to put 10-ish years on it. And you make a series of small, brave moves in your leadership and in your life. So think about what's one small, brave move that you made that created a bigger shift than you expected.
Yeah, gosh, so many small brave moves. I mean, every day, right, in your journey of growth is our brave moves. I think one of the things that I learned in my transition at QLI from being the vice president of the clinical program to the CEO role is just the process of being open to learning. If you can start every day with a mindset that there's something new I'm going to learn, it takes the pressure off feeling like you have to know everything all the time. But when I made that first transition from a role I was really comfortable in to a role that frankly sort of terrified me, just being able to say, okay, there's something unexpected that's going to happen today, something new I'm going to learn. And I'm just going to take that in as an opportunity is my favorite word. For people that have been around me a long time and work with me, they know when I say opportunity, it may not always be the most fun thing, but it is truly an opportunity to learn something new. And so I think with that shift to just being open minded that whatever comes my way, I was new to fundraising. I was new to legislative processes. I was new to overseeing certain teams in the organization that I hadn't seen before. We'd have a Medicaid crisis. That was new for me. COVID happened, right? The pandemic was new for everyone. And so being able to just take a small step forward every day, knowing that, hey, I'm going to learn something new out of this today. We'll see what it is. And when I get done with the day and head into tomorrow, I'm going to be a little smarter than the day before. What was probably a shift for me. I would say with that too, opportunities come along and you have to find places that you have boundaries to protect your energy,
Mhm.
to know, what you can handle. There's no such thing. Somebody said superwoman the other day. I'm like, there's no such thing as superwoman.
Oh,
It doesn't happen. There's only so much time, so much energy in the day to go around. And so you do have to have boundaries, but you have to be careful that you don't get in a routine with boundaries that you're saying no to too many things. Early on in my career, when I had the time and space before I started a family or had my daughter and had some supports in place that allowed me to do this, I took as many opportunities as I could to say yes. I at least made sure I didn't say no because I was scared. Maybe I truly didn't have the time and I needed to say no at that moment in time. But outside of that, I didn't let fear cause me to say no. Every chance I could, I said yes to a new opportunity, a new experience. That's ultimately how I grew and how I developed, how I met people that provided me
yeah.
opportunity, but being able to just say yes as often as you can.
I love that. And I think about what a great example of choosing courage over comfort, right? Comfort wouldn't have allowed you to, and being able to choose courage over comfort is so important. So, final question for you. I want you to think about, where are you still trying to conquer yourself instead of others?
Yeah, I think it's sort of comes full circle back to where we started the conversation. I think it's a matter of making sure that I'm not trying to be in control of every situation. I admitted I'm a little bit of a perfectionist and old habits can be hard to break, but really understanding that the best outcomes, the best processes to lead to the best outcomes are going to come from a place of teamwork and collaboration and knowing when you really do need to lead and take on something versus when it's okay to stand behind your team and elevate them and allow them to shine and to succeed in a way that's going to develop pride. So I think it's always a matter for me of conquering that need for control. And if I'm not in control, it doesn't mean I'm not doing my job. I have a high level of accountability. It was funny. We were just doing our Gallup Strength Finders again. I've done it
Yeah.
3 times over the past couple of decades. And achiever, I'm still very much an achiever, but achiever used to be my number one or number two. And that shifted for me after I
Mhm.
took this just a few weeks ago to being an arranger, to wanting to sort of put all the pieces together for there still to be outcomes, but not necessarily needing to be the person that's driving all the time. But yeah, it's a work in progress though.
Aren't we all? Are we all? So, yes, I love that. I didn't arranger. That's interesting. I can see that in this next kind of chapter for you, that being, especially when you've talked about your vision and what you want to accomplish, I could see that being a key strength for you for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun to see it at the top. I hadn't expected it, but I'm with you. It makes sense for me. It wasn't me 20 years ago, but it makes sense for the stage that I'm
Yeah,
at in my career for
I
sure.
love that. I do have one more question. So, you attended the Brave Leadership Retreat in Siesta Key. Talk to me about
Mhm.
one takeaway that, as you did the deep inner work of conquering yourself, one thing that you took away that shifted for you, not just in leadership, but in life.
Oh gosh, so many things. So you gave us so many tools in that retreat and allowed us really the time and space to start mapping out a path, a playbook as you move forward into your life. And I think when you come back to work and home and life and you hit the ground running with things, it's important to have a strategy that allows you to step back and say, okay, what did I say I was going to do? What did I say I was going to start my day with? What did I say I was going to do as I got into times where I was feeling busy or feeling overwhelmed? What did I say I was going to do? And to come back to that. So I appreciate the tools that you gave us for that roadmap. I will say the other takeaway that I had is you're really masterful at pulling together a group of leaders and all women in this case that really were able to support each other and encourage each other. And I love the connections to be able to form those relationships and to see how that group is supporting each other moving forward. It's a huge takeaway. You can never have too many amazing women in your life to support you along the way. And it's been fun to see that continue with that group.
I love that, Pat. Thank you. It's such a good reminder. And I wish I would have known this earlier on in my career that as we continue to rise, it can get really lonely, feel isolating, right? And to be able to have this, like this circle, this network, this tribe of people that are just unselfishly fired up for you during the amazing times and there to help pick you up, right? Because the journey's this. And so is the Conquer Yourself journey. And it's something that we'll continue to work on for the rest of our lives if we're deeply intentioned, right? So, Pat, thank you so, so much for joining us today. I appreciate your stories. I appreciate your leadership philosophy and sharing more about moments when we can conquer ourselves or make that small, brave move and why we should lean into those brave conversations. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Again, always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And I just, on the note of the leadership retreat, I'm so excited about the next group of women that get to be part of that retreat coming up here soon. So all the best to you. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Pat. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Small Brave Moves podcast. If you're wanting to take this work even deeper, I'm here to help. From engaging in inspirational keynote speeches to transformational coaching and workshops for leaders and teams, page-turning books, online courses, and enlightening leadership development retreats. There are so many ways that we can work together to take your leadership to the next level. For more information, check out the show notes, and let's do this together, one small brave move at a time. See you next week.